I mean, I think it's, in any country, it's a remarkably special achievement, but perhaps in England, but there are so many teams always competing for the title, and of course, it's only been done once by the Man United team of 1999. This treble, there's a mythical quality to it. JJ, would this be Pep's greatest achievement? And let's not forget, he's won trebles before with Barcelona. He has swept the board before, but where does this stand maybe against Barcelona in 2011?
I think there's a lot of things that kind of factor into this debate. I do think that it would be Pep's greatest achievement, certainly since then, because people have been talking about it for so long. When will Pep next make it into a Champions League final and then win it? We've seen him get there a couple of years ago with City and then get beaten by Chelsea. We saw him sort of cursed as well with Bayern, getting to 3 semi-finals and losing in all of them. But I think, to do it with City and this City at this moment in time, who could, be on the brink of equaling history, sort of within their own right as well. I think that makes it sort of that bit more important and meaningful. And honestly, I think if City were to do it, I find it difficult to see how much more Guardiola can actually do with City. I don't think it will get any better than this if they are victorious in Istanbul at the weekend. And I think it's probably going to be one of those very liberating moments for Guardiola if he finally does get this victory over the line, where I think he will bury that sort of nagging, suspicion that he, or that feeling, that sort of eats into him when he gets to the latter stage of the Champions League and second guesses himself. And I'm curious to see if he's as sure in his selection of his starting 11 as he has been in some of the recent rounds, where he doesn't even opt to make substitutes unless absolutely necessary.
I agree with you, JJ. I think this would be his crowning jewel and the biggest achievement of his career. And look at what he was brought in to do with Manchester City. It wasn't just to win Premier League titles and exert their dominance, 5 Premier League trophies out of their last 6. The missing piece has always been the UEFA Champions League. And for what he hasn't done in being consistent when big games in this tournament come up, he is done in being consistent this year in ways that we have not seen before. It's still a final. And Pep, we've known him to overthink, so we'll see if he overthinks this one. But I think
let me dive in there. Again, this is something I've written about, so I'm intrigued. Which games do you think he overthought in, and he lost the game for his team? Which one?
Easiest one, Chelsea match.
Mm-hmm.
You play with Rodri in that. I'd say the Lyon one. Those are the 2 ones that jump out the most. Against Lyon, you go to a back 3 when you haven't played a back 3 most of the season. You put Kyle Walker in a different position, where Kyle Walker was one of your best players that season, because you're worried about Lyon on the counterattack to nullify their back 3. That was number 1. Again, and then against Chelsea, a season where they played without a striker, Kevin De Bruyne and Fuego, getting them to a final, but you don't play Rodri, where they had some astronomical winning percentage with Rodri on the pitch. No defensive midfielder. You put İlkay Gündoğan at defensive mid. He becomes less of an attacking threat, and you capitulate and lose 1-0.
I think you're right with both of them. I also kind of think we tend to maybe overstate that every manager makes adjustments, especially for the biggest games, because the biggest games are the games where you have to make adjustments. If it's Chelsea, a Chelsea team that, by the way, had beaten them twice in the preceding month, he had to do something different. And quite often we don't necessarily sing the manager's praises, certainly sing Guardiola's praises when he gets things right. And it just doesn't. No one notes down all the times that Guardiola's tactical changes have won Champions League games for him. And I think quite often when you go back and look at it, did he choke against Real Madrid last season, or did Rodrigo just do something absolutely mad? Did he choke against Tottenham in 2019, or did VAR just spot, one of those very marginal errors?
To hit on the Tottenham match, when it counted most, he admitted Kevin De Bruyne in that match. That's a big no-no. There was rotation. They were pushing for different.
But these things often work.
But the thing that I find fascinating about this, though, is I think Guardiola's gone from one extreme to the other, because if I recall, certainly some of his exits with Bayern, it was almost like a lack of reactivity. I think one of them, they went out on away goals when Atleti pipped them to the final. The other one, they just got totally
the back 3 against Barcelona. That was
Yeah,
quite
that as
bad
well.
when he played 3-on-3.
So he's gone from sort of that sort of inability to he's sort of fluctuated between changing too much, changing too little, and now it's a question of whether he can just get the measurement just right, because we saw over the two legs in the semi-finals no changes, I think, in the first leg, and then the changes only came in when they were home and hosed in the second, and that sort of strikes me as somebody who has now settled and accepted, what will be his best, his strongest starting 11, and now he knows who he can count upon, sort of to be the first ones to answer the call to jump in if needed, but also accept that they're probably not going to play, the lion's share of minutes in these big games.
Something very strange going on in the comments, because for once Vic agrees with me. Pep's approach has made him more successful. We can criticize him, but he knows best. I mean, look, my view is managers make mistakes all the time. The difference is this is the Champions League, not a 38-game league season. Those mistakes in a low-scoring sport like football, they can make all the difference in the world. Who was it as well? Amy Casatera saying, don't underestimate Inter Milan. Please don't you worry, Amy. We're going to let Mike Lahoud off the chain in part 2. But for now, let's assume, Mike, that Pep runs with the team we expect him to. Ake and Walker at fullback, Stone stepping into midfield. What can Inter Milan do to hurt that team?
I think it's going to come down to the two wingbacks. We've seen teams that have had success, and I go back to Real Madrid, when Bayern Munich, when they were on the front foot in the second leg, and at different times in the first leg. Although both teams lost, they had bright spots, and it's going to come down to when they have possession. Look at the play of Camavinga, attack-minded fullback. He breaks through the press of City's press. City, whether they're on, no matter where they play, they come to press you. That is a consistent with Manchester City. They're not a low block sort of team. They are on the front foot. Teams that have broken their press, whether it's having a fullback that can dribble out of the pressure or a midfielder that can get on either side of Rodri or Ilkay Gundogan when they go into a 4-4-2, they have success and they will create chances. The benefit of that is Inter Milan have two strikers who are in fuego. The wide players, whether it's Dumfries or I've totally forgot the other guy's name, but the left fullback, DeMarco, yes, he's been in fuego as well. But whether those two guys, if they can get into the attack and then play balls, not in the air, because City have 3 aerial center backs who are quite good in the air, but on the ground for a cutback or an early service, I think that's how they can get at them.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly one where, I think a lot for me is going to play out in this game in terms of what Inter can offer, sort of in terms of the midfield, resistance, because for me, they've been a very balanced team in the middle of the park, but it's so easy to get eaten up by that Manchester City midfield. I mean, you look at what happened to Bayern Munich when Rodri pulled out that beastly performance in the first leg. If he's on that kind of form, it's going to be very difficult for Inter to really sink their teeth in. You almost wonder if Inzaghi's actually going to try and throw someone like Brozovic in from the start, somebody who can, compete, is a more of a combatant than a player. But certainly for me, I think that this City machine is so well oiled. It's the only way that I can really see Inzaghi even half catching out Guardiola really is by maybe changing up his options in attack, because if Inter change away from this tried and tested formula that we'll come to in the second part, I think that almost plays into Guardiola's hands, because Inzaghi would be making the mistakes that we've sort of accused Guardiola of making these last couple of years. So, for me, I think it's just a question really of if City can treat this the same way that they treated Bayern, the same way that they treated Real, because if they do, I find it really difficult to imagine Inter being able to pull off the shock.